CBS presents this program in color.
Good evening. I'm Ed Murrow. The name of the program is Person to Person. It's all live, there's no film. Tonight we'll be going first to the Washington, D.C. home of Mr. and Mrs. John G. Lee. Mrs. Lee is the president of the League of Women Voters. Then we'll drop in on another Lee. Gypsy Rose Lee, actress and writer, will be waiting for us here in New York. We'll be ready to go in exactly 30 seconds.
Hi, I'm Bob Dixon. The name of our sponsor is Amoco Gas, a product so unique it stands out above all others as the finest of its kind. And these three words tell you why. Only Amoco Gas contains no lead. That means only Amoco Gas is refined to satisfy your car's high-octane requirements without power-robbing lead deposits. Thus, only Amoco Gas guarantees no lead fouling, 100% power. Try Amoco Gas this weekend. And now here's Ed Murrow.
Mrs. John G. Lee is president of the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan organization operating in more than 1,000 American communities, devoted to the proposition that good government is everybody's business, ladies included. Mrs. Lee has been active in the League for many years, and its national president for the past 7 years. For a woman with so much civic pride, it is a rather interesting coincidence that she was born on the 4th of July. Her husband, John G. Lee, is director of research for United Aircraft Corporation. The Lees have 4 grown children, and at last count 5 grandchildren. Mrs. Lee, of necessity, spends much time in Washington. Mr. Lee, of necessity, spends much time at his plant in Hartford, Connecticut. To solve this problem, they have a country place in Connecticut and the home you see here in the Georgetown section of Washington. Good evening, Mrs. Lee.
Good evening, Mr. Morrow.
You're not by any chance preparing a speech for us, are you?
I certainly am not.
Your work must take you around the country quite a bit. Do you enjoy all this traveling?
Oh, yes, I enjoy it very much. More, I think, from the point of view of the people that I meet and am working with than just the travel for travel's sake. But one of the great virtues of this sort of travel is that it gives you a chance to meet and work with extremely interesting, able people.
Well, Mrs. Lee, having done a little traveling myself, I'm sure you've discovered that it can be pretty exhausting at times, can it?
Oh, yes, of course it's exhausting, but it's rewarding, too. You know, they tease me a great deal about this. The worst part of my job is managing, when I say worst, I should say the hardest, is managing a national convention. And I'm on my feet for about 5 days and seem to never be off them, so I keep a pair of shoes under the podium so I can slip in and out of them. That seems to be a very restful thing to do. You learn all kinds of tricks in this trade.
So the shoes, the change of shoes, give you a lift, is that right?
They certainly do.
Well, you obviously have to be away from home a great deal of the time. I was just wondering how Mr. Lee takes to all this. Does he ever offer a mild complaint?
Oh, Mr. Lee is a very good sport. Why don't we ask him how he feels about it?
All right.
He's right downstairs.
Good.
I always find that it's very much better to ask him what he thinks himself than to try to anticipate what he's going to think. John, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Murrow.
I'm very glad to meet you.
Good evening, Mr. Lee. I gather from what Mrs. Lee says that the League of Women Voters has your full approval. Is that right, sir?
It certainly does, yes, indeed.
Do you and Mrs. Lee ever find yourselves on opposite sides of the political fence?
No, not really. We agree on principles. I think we always agree on principles. But we sometimes differ on the means, and so sometimes we vote opposite tickets.
So you disagree agreeably, is that it?
That's it.
Mrs. Lee, what exactly does the League of Women Voters do?
The purpose of the League of Women Voters is to try to get people interested in government and to get a feeling of responsibility for what government does. We work very hard indeed at the local level of government. We work at our state governmental problems, and we work at national governmental problems. And perhaps the best thing we do of all is to get out during the process of an election a lot of nonpartisan factual information to help voters in the voting process.
And I was right in saying that it's completely nonpartisan, wasn't I?
That's right. It is completely nonpartisan. That means it does not support or oppose parties or candidates.
Mr. Lee, we've heard of golf widows. How does a widower of the League of Women Voters spend the many days alone?
Well, it used to bother me a little bit, but it doesn't anymore because I've acquired more hobbies than I have time for. And well, my principal hobby right now might interest you a little. Anyway, I'm going to tell you about it.
Good.
There are 3 colleges up in Hartford, where we come from, that have been trying to get together and form a university. You see, there's a tremendous need for education, expanding need, and we have a campus, and we're starting to form this university. I've got the sketch of the campus here. I'd like to show you. Can I do that?
Yes, please.
Well, here it is. Well, it's quite a nice tract, as a matter of fact. You can see there's a river running down through it, about like that, with a pond in the middle and an island. And then up here in this corner is the art school and the music school and an auditorium, engineering department, library in the middle. And well, don't let me go on with this because I'll spend all night at it. I'm quite wrapped up in the matter.
We're in the dining room now, aren't we, Mr. Lee?
Yes, that's right.
There is, of course, a great need for more well-trained scientists, too, isn't there?
Oh, yes, there certainly is, and we hope to do a lot about the shortage. I think we can, too.
Well, it's too bad the rest of the Lees can't be with us tonight, sir.
Well, it is, but we're pretty lucky because Tony, who's our youngest boy, won't you call him? I think he's upstairs. Yes. He's up from Fort Gordon on Lee's, which is pretty handy.
Yes.
And then another thing, we keep in touch with the other kids by sort of a newsletter that I write. Here comes Tony now. Here we are.
I'd like to introduce our youngest son, Tony, to you, Mr. Murrow.
Good evening, Tony.
Good evening, Mr. Murrow.
How are things in the Army these days?
Things are just fine, sir.
Tony, just what sort of assignment do you have?
Well, that's rather difficult to say. I was trained as a radio technician, but I'm doing KP and guard just now.
KP and guard. I suppose your sergeant is an altogether admirable man, is he?
Oh, by all means.
Mrs. Lee, you seem to have had no difficulty in successfully pursuing a career and raising a family. What's the formula?
Well, of course, I don't think a mother of a family this size pursues much of a career except the family during the early days of the family life. I found myself thoroughly involved in community affairs when my children were young, and as soon as they grew up, why, the job seemed to grow too. I couldn't possibly hold down the job I have now and be involved with small children.
Well, I suppose when you were growing up, your parents weren't faced with this sort of problem, were they?
Not this very particular problem, but they were faced with all kinds of different problems, and there were none of them too easy, I must say. You know, it might interest you to know that my father, for example, was very much involved in the early development of the automobile industry. I think he had the first horseless carriage in the state of Connecticut. I'd like to show it to you.
Yes.
It makes rather an interesting picture, I think. And it makes us also feel a little bit more comfortable in our modern automobiles. This was a picture of the Columbia motor vehicle, which was called the Mark 8. And he did all the early experimental work and had the first internal combustion engine that was used in Hartford. And he inherited some of this kind of interest, I guess, by his father, from his father. You see this picture of an early airplane up here. This was developed by my grandfather, Sir Hiram Maxim, who actually flew it way back in the early 1890s, a little bit before the Wright brothers did, I am told.
Mr. Lee, I know that you're an aeronautical expert. What was the wing spread of that aircraft?
It's about 105 feet. It's about as big as a 4-engine transport, such as we have now.
And the automobile was probably a single-cylinder job, wasn't it?
No, the engine was steam.
Was it?
2 of them, about 180 horsepower each.
Uh-huh.
And, well, I think that, well, the old gentleman built some wind tunnels before he built these airplanes.
I see.
It actually flew some slight distance. I won't say how far, but he did get off, and obviously he landed.
Well, that was certainly a long time before you got into aviation, wasn't it?
Yes, that was a long while back.
I know that you're an aeronautical engineer. What's the big project at the moment?
Well, the high-speed aircraft and missiles are the big project. My own lab, the company's lab, runs largely to wind tunnels. We have a little one that does about well, Mach 8, which is 5,000 miles an hour, thereabouts, which is quite a bit faster than Sir Hiram could fly.
Yes, it all sounds very complicated. Mr. Lee, your organization must be confronted with complicated situations, too, isn't it, Mrs. Lee? What's the toughest problem your league faces?
Well, I used to think that the toughest problem was to persuade people to do things about government. They seem to be a little bit, reluctant every now and again, and to get people to exert leadership is also another difficulty. But I've rather changed my mind. In the last 2 months, we've been undertaking an examination in the public sense, getting lots and lots of people to talk about the development of United States foreign policy in terms of the present crisis, try to find out the causes of this crisis. And I think I've had to change my mind because we've had such phenomenal response. People are eager to understand and to do something. That doesn't quite answer your question, but to me, that is a very important thing today.
Well, you do find a great increase in the interest in foreign policy.
A tremendous increase and a very earnest eagerness to find out why the situation exists and what the citizen can do about it. I think that's very encouraging.
Well, Mrs. Lee, you put in long hours and you work hard and you draw no salary. What's the real reward?
Well, I think rather an intangible thing. The reward to me is this business of seeing people through experience and contact grow. Same kind of thing you feel about your children, I suppose. You like to see them grow and develop. And I think the experience that the League has brought to so many individual women, and their husbands too, throughout this country has been the most exciting thing that happens to me, and certainly the most rewarding.
Well, Mr. and Mrs. Lee, I'd like to ask you both, who is the more persuasive, the male or the female? Mrs. Lee?
Well, that's kind of a hard question. I think that, personally, that in one circumstance, one is more persuasive than the other, and vice versa. To my mind, the thing that's important is that we have a partnership, get along together and work together.
Mr. Lee?
Well, there are certain females, I think granddaughters, for example, are unusually persuasive.
How many granddaughters do you have, Mr. Lee?
Well, I think there are 3, and 2 grandsons.
Anything you want to add to this discourse on persuasiveness, Tony?
No, I don't think so.
You don't want to be committed?
No.
Do you have difficulty sometimes in persuading your superiors in the Army?
Sometimes, yes.
Well, good luck to you anyway. Thank you very much, Mr. and Mrs. Lee, and thank you, Tony.
Well, good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank
Good
you.
night. Thank you again. In just a moment, we'll take you for a visit with Gypsy Rose Lee.
Thousands of Amoco dealers have signed this pledge card and are proudly displaying it in their windows. It reads, "We pledge the best, to care for your car as if it were our own, to remind you of its needs to protect you against trouble, to maintain clean, attractive station facilities for your convenience, to do everything we can to make your driving a pleasure." Look for the words, "We pledge the best" at your Amoco dealers. It's your assurance of complete satisfaction, just as fine Amoco products deliver complete satisfaction on the road. Clear, white Amoco gas, the only motor fuel refined to satisfy your car's high-octane requirements without leaving power-robbing lead deposits. Amoco gas, the only gas that guarantees no lead fouling, 100% power. Amoco approved lubrication, correct chassis lubrication as specified by your car's manufacturer. Amoco batteries, tires, and accessories proven for year in, year out dependability and quality. Super Permalube motor oil, the motor oil that reduces friction so effectively that it can save you gasoline. Gives up to 34 4/10 extra miles in every tankful. Look for and expect the best at the Amoco sign of greater values. It's the safe, sure way to carefree motoring. And now back to Edward R. Murrow.
Gypsy Rose Lee cannot sing or dance, but she's a show business phenomenon. Starting at the age of 4, when she performed in vaudeville, she's been a headliner in burlesque, carnivals, and nightclubs. She was a star in the Ziegfeld Follies, had a fling at the movies, acted on television, wrote 1 play, 2 novels, and has just completed her memoirs, called appropriately enough Gypsy, to be published by Harper's in May. Miss Lee is also vice president of the Greenwich Village Humane Society. Gypsy Rose Lee and her 12-year-old son, Eric, live in this large house on the fashionable east side of New York when they're not touring the country with Miss Lee's current act. Gypsy bought this house about, 14 years ago, I think. Good evening, Miss Lee.
Good evening.
Good evening, Eric.
Good evening, Mr. Moreau.
How are you tonight?
Fine, thank you.
Eric, what was that you were playing?
On the Ice of Sweetbriar.
Aha. Do you remember the first piece you learned to play on the piano?
Well, I remember its name, but I don't remember how to play it.
You don't?
Wigwam, dear. You know how to play the wigwam.
No, I don't know it.
Oh, honey, surely you haven't forgotten the wigwam.
Have a try.
Oh, I can't really, Mr.
All
Moreau.
right.
Well, play a little of the box, then. I love that wigwam.
I don't remember that either.
Gypsy, tell me, do you play too?
No, Ed, I can't afford it, dear. It's cost me $3,000 for him to learn how to play on the Ice at Sweetbriar.
And he's forgotten wigwam. Oh, well. Eric, this is bad. Eric, I know you travel with your mother when she's on the road. Do you keep up with piano lessons and your schoolwork while you're traveling?
Well, it's hard to keep up with piano lessons, but with my schoolwork, I do it mostly on the road unless I'm in the city, when I go to the regular professional children's school.
But when you're on the road, you do it sort of correspondence-like, is that it?
Yes, sir.
And do you always keep up with your lessons?
I try my best.
Yes, he does. I can answer for that.
Gypsy, do you help with the homework?
Yes, Ed. When we're on tour, I'm PS 17. That is until we come to arithmetic. I was all right when he was in the 3rd and 4th grades, but now that he's in the 7th, I'm in trouble. You know, I never went to school myself. Well, I did. I went for 5 days, but we never got beyond the foresies and the multiplication tables. So now that we're in fractions, I'm having a terrible time. The only fractions I know is 10% of my agent.
Eric, tell me, what is your favorite subject at school?
Geography.
Geography.
Yes, I think the reason is because I've traveled so much, it just sort of comes natural to me.
Mm-hmm. So you have an advantage over the other fellows, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Do you collect things on your trips away from home?
Yes, we do, Mr. Merle. We collect stamps.
Uh-huh.
Would you like to see some of them?
Yes,
Oh, I
certainly.
just happen to have 6 or 8 albums right handy here.
That's quite a collection of pictures on your walls, Gypsy.
Oh, yes, I've been collecting them for many years. Darling, will you go over and sit down and get the tweezers and help me with this? Well, let's see now. Here's the German album, and here's our Australian album.
Eric, do you specialize in one type of stamp?
Yes, we do, Mr. Merle. We specialize in Australian stamps.
Ah, here they are. Here's one I'm particularly proud of, and I think Eric is too. This is the first prize he won at an exhibition. These are his Australian varieties.
Uh-huh.
That means there's something wrong with each one of them. This one, for instance, Eric found in a, well, we don't really need the tweezers, but I have what says underneath there is that this has a kangaroo with a tongue sticking out. And Eric found this in a box with about 5,000 other penny reds.
Uh-huh.
And this one, of course, has a crown over A, and they're inverted watermarks. And then, oh, here's something that we're both pretty proud of. This is the first prize Eric won at the Fipex exhibition.
What's Fipex?
5th International Philatelic Exhibition.
Aha. Thank you very much, Eric. I am now enlightened. Gypsy, aside from helping Eric with his stamp collection, what do you do with your spare time when you're on the road?
Oh, I fish.
Fish?
Yes.
Are you a casual or a devoted fisherman?
Well, why don't you come upstairs and look at my tackle box and just see if you can judge for yourself, hmm?
Fair enough.
Eric, darling, would you put away the stamps, sweetheart? We have to go up in the elevator, and it's pretty cold up here, so you better bundle up. See, my house is built with one room on each floor.
Ah, yes.
See, the drawing room is on the first floor. Then the next floor, this is Eric's bedroom that we're passing now. And the next floor is my bedroom. And the library is on the 4th floor. I've given up trying to heat this elevator. It's so cold in here. 4th floor, ladies, cloaks, suits, better dresses, pots, pans. I'm going to use $1 tour, honey.
This is the first time we have been in such a small elevator, Gypsy.
Oh, here's the library.
You were going to show us your fishing gear?
Oh, yes. You can always tell when it's spring, Ed. First thing I do is get out the tackle box. Sort of oil the reels and check the fly, see if the moths got in them. First crocus, usually. You know, I used to have a little tackle box, but I found out that I was collecting so many lures that I had to get a big one. And look.
You did, too.
Isn't that beautiful? Just filled with all sorts of goodies. Here, for instance, oh, this is a surferino. Love it. But this, one of my lucky Louis. Oh, look at this, Ed.
Ah.
Have you ever fished with these in Puget Sound?
Yes, I have indeed.
Well, you notice how it works. You see, when you get a bite, you have 4 chances here of getting a bite. It pulls down, and he hooks himself.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty clever, I think. And here's a river runt, my bug repellent, aspirin. Oh, dear, I wish I were in a rowboat right now. It's a bucktail.
Yeah.
Got a lot of beautiful muskies on that. Oh, and this, Ed. One of my prize lures.
What is it? I can't see it very well.
You can. It was made by a dentist.
Oh, obvious. Yes.
You see?
I see now.
These are Fluger weedless hooks.
Yeah.
And this is the action it has in the water. But this actually spins, too, in the water.
Did you ever catch anything with that?
That's how I got it. I saw it hanging on a wall in a lodge I was staying in up in Wisconsin. And I said, oh, I have to have that. You have to give it to me, please. I can't live without that lure. And they said, well, this lure goes to whoever catches a fish on it. Everyone who has lived here has tried. So I took it out one afternoon late and caught myself a muskie. Well, it was a keeper anyway, 32 inches. Actually, it was about 36 inches. I don't take them when they're just the legal size. I don't think that's very fair.
Is that your only trophy?
Oh, no, I have a few other things that I've had stuffed. Oh, some of my old licenses. Gee whiz, 1950. It's been so long since I've really done any serious fishing. Here's one of my trophies. This is a muskellunge. I caught him in Wisconsin. Look at those teeth. They go all the way down the back of the throat.
Would you rather fish for muskies or for salmon?
Well, I don't know. I love fishing for both of them. I think they're wonderful. But there's something about catching a muskie that's just pretty wonderful, really.
What happened to the rest of that one?
We ate it.
You know, I've never caught a muskie.
Oh, well, Ed, don't feel too badly about it, darling. Some people have fished for 40 years and haven't caught one. They're elusive, but oh, when you've tied onto one, you really know you're fishing. You know what they do, Ed? It's a peculiar thing. When you fish with suckers,
yeah.
live bait, with a harness. Both hands, you don't cast for a muskie, you heave. Retrieving action, bring your rod back with retrieving action. And when he takes the fish, he goes right down to the bottom of the lake, in the weeds.
Yeah.
And he plays with it, and he toys with it, and he scales it. And in the meantime, all the other fish gather around because he's showing off.
Uh-huh.
I know he is. I know he's down at the bottom of that lake just showing off with this fish. And when he decides that he's had a big enough audience, then he turns it around in his mouth and swallows it. And that's when you have to set your hook.
You know, you're the first person I've ever known who knew what a muskie did down there in the weeds.
Oh, I've analyzed
Well,
it
anyway,
very
I'm convinced. You're a fisherman.
Did you have to be convinced that?
How do you describe your professional talents, Gypsy?
Oh, you mean my theatrical talents? Oh, well, not really talents there. I'm a performer.
Would you like to be an actress?
Oh, of course I would, Ed. Every performer wants to be an actress. But, well, I don't get many opportunities to act. And when I do, if the script is sent to me, I'm usually offered a script where I'm the striptease with a heart of gold, or I spend the second act in the bathtub. I feel as long as I'm going to do that, I might as well do it in a nightclub where I get paid more money.
Well, Gypsy, you've been a headliner for something like 20 years now. I'm sure you've had a lot of wonderful experiences, but what do you recall as your worst experience in show business?
Well, there was that time I fell off the runway at Minsky's.
Why that?
Pretty awful. What do you mean, why that?
Why was that so terrible?
Ed, have you ever fallen off a runway?
No, I don't think...
No. Getting back was really something. I had a lot of help, though.
Tell me, do you tell that story in your new book?
Oh, Ed, I tell everything.
Is it a big book?
Pardon?
Is it a big book?
Yes, it's a big, thick book. A lot of pictures, too.
Is this your writing room?
Oh, no, I don't work up here. I write down in the snake pit. Would you like to see it?
Snake pit?
Yes. You'd probably call it an ivory tower.
I probably would.
Oh, heavens, I hope I can make these steps. I've never tried it in this dress before. Well, here goes. If you hear a dull thud, honey, it'll be me.
Well, you take it easy. We can wait.
Whoop. Well, I made it.
Gypsy, it's not only an attractive gown, but you can walk in it.
Yes, I just ran in it. Beautiful color, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Pink. You know what Oscar Wilde says about pink? He says, beware of any woman past 30 who wears pink. She's either hiding a past or contemplating a future. He's right. I'm right on both counts as far as I'm concerned.
Gypsy, how did you get into this literary business?
Well, during the World's Fair, Walter Winchell asked me to do a column for him. And I rented a typewriter. I'd never played, oops, my goodness, never played one before in my life. And a little book came with it that taught you in 3 easy lessons, you know, sag, 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 dag, dag, dag. And I wrote the column. And I did it in a couple of days, and I still had 3.5 weeks left with a typewriter, so I started the G-String Murders. That's simple.
Do you find writing easy or difficult?
Well, it depends. I think when I'm really in the groove, and I think of the scene I'm writing as a scene that would be appearing on the stage, then I write it as Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. The end of the scene is a blackout, and then it comes very easy. Those are my good days.
Gypsy, what's that on the bed there?
Oh, those are my cats. The most contented people in the house. I have 3 others, and this little one, Tina, is going to have babies any minute.
Uh-huh.
Then we'll have 8 cats. Do you know anybody who wants a purebred Siamese cat? Oh, we can't give them away. We love them too much.
In your books and magazine articles, what have you found to be your biggest writing problem, Gypsy?
Oh, punctuation, I guess, Ed. You know, I told you before I didn't go to school for 5 days, and they never got around to teaching me punctuation. The problems of putting conversations in little quote things, and these little round things, the brackets, and, you know, apostrophes and question marks. So as anybody knows a question mark. But the other things I found rather difficult. Fortunately, I have very good editors.
So you do your punctuating over the telephone with your hands sometimes, is that it?
Oh, this is when it's really rough, especially with my galleys, when I had to change some of the things in the galleys. I love doing it, though. It makes me feel so professional. But I had to do it over a telephone. I said, you know, the little round things that go up above, assuming, of course.
You know, we have reached the point of a little round thing right now, a period, because we have run out of time.
No.
Thank you very much, Gypsy.
Oh, I loved it, and it's over too soon.
And say good night to Eric, will you, please?
I certainly shall. Good night.
Good night. We'll be back in a moment.
It sure feels great to relax the feet. And you know, the valves in a car engine have a good deal in common with human feet. They go up and down countless times. Moreover, they frequently get fouled up with carbon, gum, and varnish. Amoco has solved this problem with a unique product that's magic for motors. It's Amoco 586 Special Valve Stem Oil. Keeps your car valves clean and smooth running, stops them from sticking. Ask for Amoco 586 this weekend. Now back to Ed Murrow.
Next week in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, a visit with the country's best-known salesman of garden seeds, David Burpee and his family. And in New York, a visit with former opera star Gladys Swarthout and her husband. There are some of the people who made tonight's program possible. And now, from person to person, good night and good luck.
Friday Person to Person will be presented by Life magazine, which always brings you an exciting variety of picture reports. This week, for instance, you watch a record-breaking crowd of tourists at play in the Caribbean sunny vacation spots. See the first color pictures of America's amazing new push-button air defense. And read a minister's criticism of our troubled Sunday schools and his suggestions for improving them. Don't miss Life this week or any week.